Welcome to March's Strategic Committee meeting. Just a couple of things, first of all, for housekeeping. There are no fire drills, so should the fire alarm go off, please leave by the designated exit and to the assembly point. Also, could I ask everybody to make sure that their mobile phones are turned off? Thank you. Yes, as long as they're on silent, and if they start vibrating on the table, maybe you just lift it up so that it doesn't disturb anybody else. Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, the chair's not well today, so you're going to have to put up with me chairing this meeting. So hopefully we'll get onto it in a moment and get going. Okay. Item 1, apologies for absence. Apologies for absence. I've got them on my list, so if you want me to. So Councillor Edric Hobbs, Councillor Matt Martin, and I will send Tony Locke's apologies as well. He's unwell. Councillor Hobhouse is substituting for Edric, I think. Edric Hobbs. Thank you. Item 2, minutes from the previous meeting. So I hope everybody's read the minutes from the previous meeting. Yeah. And is everybody, sorry. Can you put your mic on, please?
Consistently seem to be two people. What's the word? Brain's gone like mush. When you don't vote either way. Abstain. Thank you very much. And is it because people were online, or is it because there were people in the room? Because it's not a counted vote. There's no names to the votes. I just wondered because it's consistently two people abstaining all the time on every vote.
Sorry, can you explain? I'm talking about the minutes. So you agree the minutes?
Yes.
Yeah. So you do agree the minutes?
I do. It was just a question about the minutes.
Yeah. So would somebody like to clarify that, how that's recorded? Taylor?
Chair, I'm a little uncertain as to what the question was. Could you just repeat?
Just to clarify, at page 19, it says there were 5 in favour, 0 against and 2 abstentions. I think there weren't enough people in the room to have 7 votes. So are the abstentions counted from people online or?
No, it should have only been whoever
just
was in
enough.
the room.
Actually, I'm wrong. There were just enough. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah.
Excuse me, if you look at the top of the minutes, there were 7 in the room. So there was Councillor Tony Locke, myself,
yes,
Councillor Steve Ashton, Councillor John Hunt, Councillor Martin Well, Councillor Mike Carswell, and Councillor Wes Reid. That comes to 7 people.
Yes, it's just raised as sort of slightly odd that 2 people were constantly. I don't know. But anyway, I'm happy with. I shouldn't sign the minutes off anyway because I was online, so I wasn't attending in person.
Okay, thank you. So in that case, I ask the question again: that everybody that was in the meeting, do they agree that the minutes are a correct record for that meeting? And you're happy that I signed them? Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 3, declarations of interest. Has anybody got any declarations of interest today? No? Okay, thank you. Item 4, public question time. Have we got any public speakers today? Yep, sorry, what's your name was, sir? Your name was, sir? David Long, thank you. You have 3 minutes.
After the financial emergency, held-up housing across large parts of Somerset due to nutrient neutrality must be one of the single most pressing issues in Somerset. The economic and social impacts are profound. Whilst this is a well-written paper, I am disappointed that so many phosphorus P mitigation initiatives haven't progressed with more urgency and are now at or near the implementation stage. The paper hasn't covered the key strategic issue of a catchment-wide nutrient neutrality policy, nor has the promised relevant legal instruction advice been disclosed. I'd like to see that if possible. Wessex Water, a key strategic partner, why aren't they here today to both contribute to policy discussion as subject matter experts and also to take relevant questions? Question 1, for ongoing member assurance, will the Council carry out nutrient neutrality performance benchmarking, number of P credits, cost of P credits, number of houses built, etc., against other councils, e.g. Wiltshire, Cornwall, Norfolk? Question 2, Wessex Water can increase P removal by increasing existing dosing of ferrous sulfate or by installing at a small treatment works a packaged treatment plant. Should the Council use those methods as a baseline to compare P credit generation efficiency and net P credit cost to other new or technical solutions like reverse osmosis? If newer technologies prove more expensive, can the bid funding be redirected into those conventional but potentially less costly treatments? Question 3, how many of each of social and affordable houses are currently held up? Question 4, this is a surprising omission. How many homes does this P mitigation strategy aim to get built between now and 2030? Why isn't that key information of estimates of houses that can be built, in which district area and when included? This is, after all, the primary outcome of this strategy. Getting back to a 5-year housing supply is a key community benefit to restore the primacy of local plans and bring order to speculative development. There is a table of the number of held-up houses by each former district area. Can you say whether releasing all of those held-up homes via P mitigation would restore a 5-year housing supply in each district area, or if not, how far it would contribute? Reverse osmosis is a well-established and long-standing technology used worldwide for desalination for drinking water. It is also used, for example, to extract lithium salts from old Cornish mines water. Salinity Solutions is an undercapitalized and risky startup who, in a competitive bid process, failed to secure a Cornish lithium extraction contract in 2023. Thank you. Once the reverse osmosis 6-month trial completes, and presuming the P generation amounts and costs remain viable, they may not when filter cleaning, transport and refining costs are taken into account. Will the Council move to a competitive bid process for Somerset-wide implementation of reverse osmosis, as there are potentially 84 small works and that will require an established company to get best value? Thank you.
Kate, would you like to respond to that? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll take each of those questions in turn. Firstly, I'd just like to thank David for recognising that it's a well-written paper, and just to let people know that whilst we are at the implementation stage, the government funding was only actually confirmed on the 19th of December 2023. We've only received at the moment £500,000 of that capital funding that's been confirmed by government, and this was received on the 23rd of February. What we're going to be considering now is an interim delivery strategy, and this is in order to demonstrate committed spend to DLUC. So DLUC have set some requirements in order to demonstrate committed spend by the end of this financial year. And then we anticipate receiving the balance of the funding, which is the 9.1 million, in the first quarter of 2024-25. So obviously progress will be dependent on us actually receiving that money. We can't implement schemes until we've received that funding from government. The paper, like I said before us, is considering the implementation of the interim delivery strategy. I think we probably need to, if you can, Mr. Orr, clarify what you mean by a catchment-wide nutrient neutrality policy. So we already operate on a catchment-wide basis, and the nutrient mitigation that we will be finding will be on a catchment-wide basis. And for each of those river catchments, the mitigation will unlock the housing that falls within that river catchment or is held up at the moment by nutrient neutrality within that river catchment. So perhaps you can clarify that at a later date, or I'm happy to have a discussion at the end of the meeting to try and clarify what it is that you meant by that, if I've misunderstood the question. Yet just to say again that this is an interim delivery strategy. We are working closely with Wessex Water. They are on the call at the moment so they're here to answer any questions should they arrive. But equally, if there are any others, we can always take them away. So first question you raised was about member assurance, that will we be performance benchmarking? At the moment, we're still waiting for the government, and that's the Department for Levelling Up and Housing and Communities, to issue what monitoring and evaluation requirements will be attached to the funding. But obviously we will of course be monitoring how many P credits we're issuing, the cost of those P credits and the number of houses being built. In terms of performance benchmarking, we're also working on the assumption that DLUP will be collecting that from all the other catchments that have been afforded funding from the government. That includes Wiltshire, Cornwall, Norfolk, and there's a Solent region. There's a number of them. So question number 2, in terms of Wessex Water and ferrous sulfate removal. So we have discussed this as a potential measure with Wessex Water previously. However, our understanding is that Wessex Water are prohibited from taking additional funding for capital improvements outside of their agreed asset management programme. However, if this position changes, we will of course explore this opportunity further. At the current time, just to reassure members, we are piloting the reverse batch osmosis. And I think it's important to emphasise this is not traditional reverse osmosis, it's reverse batch osmosis. And therefore, we're piloting it to understand the actual costs. If that ends up being too costly, we will of course not pursue it any further because we need to demonstrate that it's representing good value for money. In terms of the number of social and affordable housing units that are held up, we haven't got exact figures in the report that we've got. We've got dwellings that are currently held up. Obviously, some of those sites will have Section 106 requirements for affordable housing, and as yet, those Section 106 requirements haven't been confirmed. But we have got overall housing figures that are held up across the catchment area. In terms of how many homes this mitigation strategy will unlock, again, I would just like to emphasise this is an interim delivery strategy. We would ideally have much more detail on the project before we're bringing it before members, but this is to meet a requirement set very clearly by government to demonstrate committed spend by the 31st of March. We have committed to review the projects and the progress and reporting on progress back to this committee within 6 months. In terms of the 5-year land supply question, so 5-year land supply, yes, is of course impacted by nutrient neutrality, but it isn't the only thing that impacts the ability to demonstrate a 5-year land supply. So previous housing delivery figures will impact your ability to demonstrate a 5-year land supply. Windfall calculations, the age and the deliverability of some local plan allocations will often influence a local authority's ability to demonstrate a 5-year land supply, as well as build out rates on some of the large strategic sites. So I wouldn't dispute that nutrient neutrality is having a significant impact on 5-year land supply, but it isn't the only thing that can impact 5-year land supply. And there are some local authorities, I'm sure, in the country that aren't impacted by nutrient neutrality and also struggle to demonstrate a 5-year land supply. The figures on the 5-year land supply are also provided in the monitoring report, which is also coming before the committee on this agenda. In terms of reverse osmosis and the concerns that Mr. Orr has raised about The use of reverse osmosis, again, I would like to emphasise that the trial is seeking to test reverse batch osmosis and not traditional reverse osmosis, which we already know is a proven technology, but a costly one for phosphate credits. Reverse batch osmosis is a much more energy efficient technology. And as I've said previously, we are piloting the technology, funding the pilot through the nutrient mitigation funding, and this will clarify the costs associated with using reverse batch osmosis for phosphate credit creation. The waiver covers the initial trial and the wider rollout for the technology. But again, if it does not demonstrate good value for money, it will be a pilot and it won't be taken any further. I think those are all the questions, but I'm happy to catch up with you at the end of the meeting, Mr. Orr, and then I can clarify what you meant by the catchment-wide nutrient neutrality policy.
Okay, thank you, Kate. I'll cut the questions from councillors here, but first I want to ask, actually, that item 4 was public question time. So your questions, are they relevant to that for the officer? Yeah. Okay. So go, yep.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, what I was going to request to make sure that all the members could stay on top of this was could you circulate the questions and the answers to the committee to make sure we have those, because there's a lot of information there. And personally, I'm not sure I managed to capture all of it in the as Mr. Orr or Ms. Murdoch were speaking. So I would like to do that to make sure I've not missed something. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Henry? Again, Henry. Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, so item 5, presentation of a local nutrient mitigation fund award. So Alison, you can lead off on this? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just by way of a few words of introduction, I think Kate has already mentioned, we received the funding of 9.6 million for Nutrient Mitigation Fund grant advised to us in December. We have to show by the 31st of March that we have committed spend to the 9.6 million, and that's the rationale for bringing this report before you as members today, so that we can go back to DLUC and tell them that we have committed spend. It is very much an interim strategy, which Kate will outline further, but I just want to thank the officer team who've been working on this, because they've had very little time to pull this together. It's not as detailed as we might have liked it to be, but necessary given the timescales involved. So many thanks particularly to Kate, Paul and Emmeline for their work on pulling this together in a very short space of time. Paul, I think you're going to kick off first, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Right. First slide, please. Thank you very much, Kate. The main purpose, as Alison said, is to demonstrate spend to DLUC. In the traditional sense, this report also has 2 other matters. It's really sort of set the scene to the actual main part of the agenda, which is actually the Nutrient Mitigation Fund. So the first parts provide the overall strategic context for updates in relation to nutrient neutrality in terms of the various area updates that we've recently given, as we've done on previous committee reports. The second part of the report focuses very much on recent government announcements and changes, so I'll give a summary there. I would also refer you to the main report for further more detailed updates, and then I'll hand over to Kate to provide an update on the local nutrient mitigation fund and the council's award for 9.6 million. Next slide, please. And the next one. In terms of where we are, in terms of updates that affect the whole of the Three River catchment areas, as advised at the last committee meeting, we have now updated the phosphate budget calculator. It has been uploaded onto our website. It is now working well. Yes, there were a few teething problems with a number of data sets relating to agricultural use that weren't loading properly, but what IT system ever works perfectly on its first time. In terms of other work, just be aware that the website also has a range of information in terms of the user guide, which has been updated explaining how to use the new calculator. Similarly, we've given a summary of the technical changes. There's a report there that explains, gives a summary of what changes have been made and why. And then lastly, there is a letter of Natural England support for the use of the calculator here in Somerset. Moving on, the calculator also allows the user to work out their mitigation requirements post 2030. You'll recall that when we last reported to this committee, we explained how wastewater treatment works were required by the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023, as it was then as a bill, but now it's an act, requires wastewater treatment works to be improved to technical achievable limits. That is where those wastewater treatment works serve a population of greater than 2,000 population equivalent. That means that within, next slide please, Kate, that means within your calculations, you can use the calculator to work out your populations and is deemed certain in terms of the habitats regs assessments. In terms of stakeholder engagements, be aware that we continue to have monthly meetings with our colleagues around the authority and the area teams. That also involves Dorset Council. It also involves the Environment Agency, Natural England and Wessex Water, who are also on this call today. In terms of other things, we continue with our developer forum meetings. The next scheduled meeting was on the 27th of March. The previous one was in December. All of those are recorded, so if you are unable to view those, members are also welcome to join those meetings, and often a number do. Next slide, please. Just a brief update on where we are on a national test case, which is Jurston Farm, Wellington, as reported in previous committee meetings. This has become a national test case. The dismissed planning appeal in August 2022 had got to the High Court and dismissed as challenged by CG Fry and the operations of the Habitats Regs assessment. The Court of Appeal hearing was held on the 19th and 20th of this month, i.e. yesterday and the day before. If those who want to listen to those proceedings, I've given the web links there. They're not within the committee report because they've only been released in the last 2 days. The first one relates to the 19th. It did carry over the 20th, so the second hyperlink is to the second day, which is yesterday. Next slide, please. And again, please. As you're aware, in our reports, it covers a number of updates on the river catchment areas. First of all, I'm going to cover the River Axe catchment area. This doesn't flow within to the Somerset Levels and Moors Ramsar site. This is a River Axe that flows southwards into East Devon. It covers parts of Area South, formerly South Somerset, around the Chard locality, environs, but also in the former Somerset Western Taunton area in terms of the Blackdown Hills. We are not the lead authority there. East Devon are, because East Devon are the most affected local authority, hence they are the lead. Collectively, we're using our experience of round one, i.e. Somerset and Dorset Council officers, to assist East Devon District Council submit a round two bid. It is our understanding that there is only going to be, this will be the second and last round for Nutrient Mitigation Fund. The deadline for that is the 26th of April. Next slide, please. Thank you. Moving on to catchment areas that affect the Somerset Levels and Moors Ramsar sites. First of all, we'll look at the River Brue. In summary, approximately 16 planning applications have been held in abeyance, seeking phosphate solutions. This equates to some circa 800 homes or dwellings. The council has agreed legal processes for 2 third-party phosphate credit schemes in the River Brue catchment area, and they are Yew Tree Farm, Walton, and also Manor Farm, Pressley. The first one, Yew Tree Farm, involves a pig closure. It currently allows or creates just under 46 P credits. P credits, that's phosphate credits, that's mitigation, and has been allocated to release some 430 453 homes. The second phase is also been agreed in December. That creates an additional 7.46 credits. Reservations have also been made for schemes in east and south areas totaling 3.13 credits for another 51 dwellings. This is a sort of a common theme here, that planning applications are being released because mitigation measures are being found across all of the catchment areas. In terms of Pressley, the farm closure and fallowing land generates 143 credits, P credits, and is anticipated to lock approximately 14,000 homes. The second phase may come forward if all of that is allocated, as we understand at this moment in time. Next slide, please. Both the calculations of credits and the management plans have been agreed with Natural England and secured by Section 106 for both of those schemes, as previously mentioned. Furthermore, it should be remembered that all P credit sale allocations are agreed between the promoter and the applicant. The local planning authority does not have any control over the prioritisation or the credit price of these types of schemes, unlike the Rivertone P credits, which was actually created by the former Somerset Western Taunton, which is often referred to now as the Rivertone credit scheme. All agreed allocations are confirmed by certificates provided by the local planning authority, and in this case, all third-party credit schemes across the Somerset Leavenworth catchment area. Next slide, please. Turning to the River Parrett, there are approximately 4,500 homes seeking a phosphate solution in this catchment area. To date, Area South Committee have resolved to approve 765 dwellings with a variety of nutrient solutions, which 435 have previously been presented to this committee for prior approval to August 2020 and require redetermination. In addition, 185 dwellings were approved by the former South Somerset District Council area committees with nutrient solutions, with Section 106 awaiting completion. In terms of further details and background, as you're aware, Entrade, that's an arm's length trading company associated with Wessex Water in terms of environmental schemes and solutions, operates within this catchment area. We reported to those committees the background and what its purpose is in previous meetings, for example, July 2023. Entrade is now completed 2 rounds of marketing, with Section 106 has been released in the second market movement towards sealing. In other words, they've done 2 rounds of going out to the market. They have what they call a Dutch auction type approach, whereby they look in terms of identifying as an agent the overall costs in terms of bidding, and they will go to the highest bidder in terms of the P credits being available. Further market rounds are proposed in the spring of 2024. Please note there are also a further 2 third-party credit schemes operating in the River Parrett, Woodrow Farm and Badger Street. These are likely to generate in the order of 273 P credits, i.e. permanent credits. Finally, moving on to the River Tone catchment area. Currently, there are approximately 111 planning applications held in abeyance seeking a phosphate solution. That equates to approximately circa 2,600 homes. There are also 1 third-party scheme operating in the River Tone, Flyboat Farm, which is also likely to generate in the order of 60.515 P credits. In terms of where we are, in terms of the catchment area, in terms of the council's operational scheme, which is the River Tone P credits, as you're aware from previous reports, we have drawn everybody's attention that there is a web page on the council's website that gives more details about these schemes. Just to summarise where we are, we've done 3 rounds. Round 1, we've released 9 applications, and the details there equate to a number of dwellings. Remember, these are very small developments. They're often brownfield sites, urban sites within the urban fabrics of our settlements. They have very limited or no opportunity to provide mitigation on site. Hence, they are reliant but actually finding P credits. That is one of the main purposes of why this scheme was set up by the former council. Round two, similarly, we've given a number of applications that have been unlocked there. Clearly, that we were then expanded that our allocation process to look at slightly larger applications. Hence, the number of dwellings has increased. Finally, round three, just be aware this is an update. Only 3 applicants have actually made a request for round 3 credits, which is somewhat disappointing. But we are where we are. We have offered those credits, and that is a number of people have come back. To the next slide, please. In terms of across the catchment area of the Somerset, Levels, Moors, Ramsden, Berringham, just the overall summary is planning applications are progressing in all of the catchment areas. I hope that's the message you get from the committee report, which sets the scene for the interim development strategy work. In terms of sources, they are either through the council schemes or through third parties. Similarly, they're also including things like septic tanks and packaged treatment plants, and also orchard planting. Officers can continue delays with third parties, and as we've identified previously, we've set up a web page on the council's website to actually record the known locations of third party providers. This streamlines the process because we now know that those sources of P credits are from legitimate sources. They have been signed off by the council and also by Natural England in terms of their appropriate assessment. So we know that those solutions are credible, and to those ends, it means that we can now simplify the process rather than having individual section 106. We can now tie the implementation to conditions. Slide, please. Just a few updates on legislative updates. It's been already referred to in my presentation that the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act received a royal assent in October 2023. The LURA contains a statutory duty for water companies to upgrade their wastewater treatment works in designated nutrient sensitive catchment areas to technical achievable limits. And the removal, those technical achievable limits are those wastewater treatment works that serve a population equivalent of more than 2,000. That does mean within Somerset, there will be significant localities and significant geographical areas that are not covered by wastewater treatment works that will be improved. We have documented those locations spatially with the help of Wessex Water and also using their data. Be aware that Somerset Levels and Moors was designated a nutrient sensitive catchment area on the 25th of January 2024. Next slide, please. The overall implications is that, as I explained previously, technical achievable limits, these technical achievable limits of 0.25 milligrams per litre, that is what the technical achievable limit is for phosphates, means that these upgrades will be deemed certain for the purposes of the Habitats Regs assessment. How we have taken account of it, that's why the calculator was updated. That's why the calculator has a worksheet for the post 2030 requirements, which capture all of those upgrades. In practical terms, it means after 2030, phosphate neutrality will still be required, but the level of mitigation will be significantly reduced for most developments. Now I'm going to pass over to Kate in terms of the local nutrient mitigation fund.
Carry on with the slides or pick up any questions? I'm happy to carry on, or we can pick up questions.
Sorry, Chair.
Pick up a couple of questions.
Chair, sorry, point of order. Were those slides part of the meeting papers? Because I didn't find them. I think it's quite wrong that slides aren't posted because I'd have asked questions about that. They're part of the meeting. I'm trying to follow them and I've not seen them before.
There is nothing within those slides that's not within the committee report. We're more than welcome to hand them out after the meeting.
I prefer them to be part of the papers, Chair, as good practice, best practice, please.
Can I come back on that, Chair?
Yes.
You see, I'm on a couple of slides that we gave the latest state available information in terms of our update, in terms of the Jurston Farm terms of web links. So they are there. We've given you the most up-to-date information.
Still don't agree.
Okay, Mr. Warriors, that's noted. Thank you. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick points. I would also welcome copies of the slides because it makes it much easier to follow that. And I'm not being a pedant, but during your conversation, when you were taking us through the report on page 27, at paragraph 21C, you said that there were 14,000 homes, and the papers read 1,400 homes. Now, I'd dearly love it to be 14,000 homes, but I suspect it was a slip of the tongue. And it is actually 1,400, but I think accuracy is all. So can I just confirm that it's 1,400?
I will confirm that after the meeting. That is 1,400.
Thank you very much. I just like to be accurate.
Henry?
I'm going to get technical. I apologise. The first thing I'd like to talk about is you quite rightly said that the Wessex Water have a restriction on their capital expenditure. What you didn't say is they have no restriction on their hired-in expenditure. Now, they can hire in their existing technology, which is phosphate sulfate dosing in almost across the 84 water sewage plants, which are failing the tests at the moment. Why have you not talked to Wessex Water about doing this? And I will confirm, Mr. Chairman, with the Wessex Water Director who is on there, the exact legal position, if you wish me to.
So our understanding was that Wessex Water is not able to take payments to go above and beyond what they've agreed as part of their asset management plan programme. But if we've got Wessex Water on the call, perhaps it's best if they're able to, happy to, Matt, to answer Henry's query.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Whilst we can receive it, we don't actually get a net increase in revenue as a result because we have a revenue cap. So whilst the council, say, might pay us to do something, whilst the council will lose that money because it will come to us, it won't increase how much money we get because then we have to reduce income from elsewhere because we have a revenue cap approach that our economic regulator sets on us. So what we would all like is to be able to receive the money outside of the revenue cap so that it's not just a cost to us, but we have an income to offset that additional cost. And that's the financial arrangements under which we currently have to operate. And I understand there have been numerous discussions to try and change that to enable us to receive income outside of that revenue cap, such that if we do receive that income, it actually increases the revenue that we're allowed to collect.
Right, now I ask the question again, why have you not talked to Wessex Water about this earlier?
Matt's just explained that they're not able to take that additional money and deliver that outside of their asset management plan programme. So it wouldn't deliver any additional phosphate mitigation. It's not possible to deliver phosphate mitigation that way.
Matt, could you confirm that if you had money coming in to pay for...
Hang on a minute. Come through the chair, please.
All right.
Have a conversation
Sorry,
with
Chairman.
somebody else. Thank you.
Could you ask Matt Wheeldon, please, to explain how he can receive mitigation money to fund the hiring of units to do the existing technology on the wastewater sites?
Okay, Matt, did you hear that from Henry?
Yes.
Would you like
So it's not for us to change the rules. It requires. So we did offer this back in May 22 to Rebecca Powell as a means to try and unlock the housing crisis we had no response in that I don't think they really understood what the limitations were on the current processes. What it needs is the regulator, that's the financial regulator, Ofwat, to approve that income that comes into the business outside of our revenue cap. So it's nothing we can do. We can accept the money, but we'd be a fool to do that if we're not going to get increased revenue. So whilst you could give us the money, we wouldn't want it because we wouldn't get an increase in revenue. We'd have to reduce other people's payments to us to compensate for that income that the council gave us. So that's the financial issue. I guess the other issues are the supply chain issues, in that, as you all know, we are already moving far more phosphorus through our planned works than is ever going to be added by new properties. Our supply chain is completely stacked out. We are, and it's building rapidly into the next 5-year period too. So our ability to do more than we're currently doing with our current resources and the over demand of the supply chain is severely limited. So whilst Henry is quite right that technically it would be a better solution to add ferric to a site that currently doesn't have ferric dosing, especially at small sites, the amount of work required to do that to make it happen is not something that the Wessex supply chain can manage at this current time because of the constraints in the supply chain and the current amount of work we're already doing in this space to tackle the or to meet the targets that we've been set.
Okay. Happy, Henry? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Next question was from Mike Dunn.
It was just a very quick clarification of how Wessex Water are going to actually reduce their emissions by 2030. And is it just by ferrous sulfate, or is it another technical solution?
Hang on a sec, Mike. Hang on a sec. I'm going to hold you there a minute, because this paper is about how the council's going to spend that grant money. It's really not what Wessex Water are doing. This paper that we're looking at here is all about how Somerset Council are going to spend that money.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to get a wider view of what's going on, just for my information.
Yeah, I know, but really we're discussing this paper here this morning, and that's a wider issue. Okay.
Sure, it wouldn't have taken a long to answer, but thank you.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Sure. Last chance. No. Okay. Right. So, recommendation. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to explain.
Oh yes, of course you are. Sorry.
That's all right. No, don't worry. So yeah, just to explain the situation with the local nutrient mitigation fund that we've been awarded. So just the background, at the end of May 2023, we submitted a partnership funding bid to the government's local nutrient mitigation fund. It was in December 2023 that the government confirmed final award of 9.6 million, that the funding bid had been successful. And we now need to demonstrate committed spend by the 31st of March. Overall, by the 31st of March 2025, but the interim delivery strategy before you now, members, is to demonstrate committed spend in this financial year as part of what we anticipate to be the monitoring and evaluation requirements for DLUC. At the current time, of the 9.6 million, we have actually received 0.5 million, and we understand the remainder will be received in the first quarter of the next financial year. The funding provides huge opportunities for Somerset, and it's really good news given the impact that phosphate nutrient neutrality has had. It's going to operate as a revolving fund, so we will be effectively trading the nutrient credits that we release by the mitigation measures put in place, and that funding then gets revolved and reinvested into additional mitigation measures until such point that we no longer need phosphate mitigation to unlock the housing impacted, and at which point it can then be put into the restoration of the Somerset levels and moors. As part of the Nutrient Mitigation Fund, we're seeking to ensure that we can stack additional benefits for the Somerset area, looking not just to improve water quality, but natural flood management measures, biodiversity net gain, and also hoping to enable public access for some of the nature-based solutions where possible. Again, just to emphasise, this is an interim delivery strategy. And it sets out the indicative delivery programme that we're working to. It's provisional capital allocations for each of the mitigation projects that we're currently looking to progress. And we will commit to providing an update to the committee within the next 6 months when more information on the delivery of the Local Nutrient Mitigation Fund is known, and we'll have a better understanding of how the projects are progressing. So these are the key projects at the current time within the interim delivery strategy. So project 1 is very much looking at creating temporary credits to get us to 2030. So we're doing a 6-month trial with Salinity Solutions, which is the reverse batch osmosis process. This is secondary treatment process on wastewater, on a select number of wastewater treatment works if it's rolled out. So the unit acts as intercepts basically the effluent before it goes into the river, and delivers a secondary treatment process to remove phosphates, which then provides the credits. And this is just to get us to 2030 so that those longer term in perpetuity solutions can unlock more housing because they're mitigating at that lower level. Obviously, it's a trial. We are testing it out to see whether it can deliver cost-effective phosphate mitigation on a temporary basis. And if the trial is not successful and doesn't deliver value for money, it will end at that point. Project 2, we are looking to do a call for sites, working in partnership with the Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group. We're hoping to launch that call for sites in May. Very much looking for nature-based solutions, so planting along riparian buffer strips, wet woodlands, kind of nature-based solutions that have been identified through the Royal Haskayne phosphate mitigation report. Project 3 is working with our colleagues in the housing revenue account, but also the wider property stock that the council owns. So this includes some children homes and older persons care homes where the council operates as a landlord. We're aware that there are some septic tanks that can be upgraded, and this again will deliver additional credits. And where possible, we're looking at water efficiency measures as well. Project 4 is looking at the council's owned land opportunities to explore opportunities for nature-based solutions. So there are land holdings, particularly in the River Parrett catchment area, that we're currently exploring and looking to take projects forward there. And then there'll be further details when we provide an update on how those are progressing. Those are very much at the feasibility stage at this time. Project 5 is looking at the opportunities around miscanthus grass. Again, very much as a temporary measure to get us to 2030. We've been working with Miscanthus Nursery, Natural England and the Environment Agency. We've had officials down from DEFRA and DLUC to look at the opportunities that miscanthus grass presents. And we're looking to do an initial trial to verify the efficacy of miscanthus. One, to intercept runoff as a riparian buffer strip, to grow it on marginal land that therefore wouldn't ordinarily be used for agricultural purposes. And Miss Canthus Nursery are exploring the use of that product for food packaging and the insulation blocks and the like. But that will be a trial, and we're looking to verify the outputs from that before we roll it out. Project 6 is an allocation that we've put just to give us some flexibility, because we are often approached with new technical innovations that come into the market, new opportunities, but nothing at this stage identified under Project 6. So the recommendations before the committee in the committee report, it's to note the contents of the report and the activity that's going on across the 3 affected river catchment areas to unlock housing, to also note the recent legislative changes and the impact that that has in terms of significantly reducing phosphate mitigation requirements for developments that feed into those larger wastewater treatment works. And it's looking to delegate authority to the Chief Planning Officer in consultation with the Chair of the Strategic Planning Committee to oversee the delivery of the interim delivery strategy, including approving any documents such as the Section 106 agreements needed to implement the delivery strategy. It's to agree the spend of this 9.6 million, again, so that we can demonstrate to government committed spend in line with the grant conditions and promised outstanding funding that we anticipate receiving in financial year 24-25. It's also to commit to the spend of the local nutrient mitigation fund on the delivery of nutrient mitigation with the provisional indicative programme as spend is detailed in table 4 of the interim delivery strategy.
I've got a couple more questions here. I'll let you go again first, Henry, because you're in the room.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On your option 5, could you please add willow and reed to that, the Miscanthus grass, both of which are known to grow on the levels and all of which remove phosphate from the soil. How are you intending to use the material that when you've cut it and removed it from site? Are you going to set up some sort of heating or electrical generation to use the material? Because long term, I believe that's what we've got to do to be able to service the problems on the levels. That's my first question, Mr. Chairman.
So the Miscanthus trial is just to demonstrate its efficacy for phosphate mitigation. There is already a wider trial looking at paludiculture opportunities on the Somerset levels and moors, and Natural England are already kind of comfortable with willow and other what you would call native species, I suppose, in terms of phosphate mitigation. So they will be part, but so we don't need to trial that as such. So they will be part of Project 2, where we do a call for sites. There may well be riparian buffer strips where landowners are willing to, or offering to plant the willow, as you've already highlighted, Henry. In terms of what Miscanthus uses will be, the Miscanthus Nursery have said, yes, it's already there as a biofuel. It's a huge opportunity for carbon capture, and the government's climate change committee has actually flagged up the need to increase the planting of Miscanthus grass alongside tree planting, because it's a huge opportunity for carbon capture. They're looking at, rather than just use it as a biofuel, they are wanting to expand. They've developed packaging, recyclable packaging using Miscanthus, and they're also developing insulation blocks. So they're keen to look at kind of locking in the carbon in that packaging and those insulation blocks. All very early days. I think part of the problem that they've got, particularly with the recyclable packaging issue, is meeting the market demands. We haven't got enough miscanthus to meet the market demands, provide their recyclable packaging. But we're keen at the moment to understand and demonstrate the efficacy for phosphate removal. Because I think it's fair to say that there are some colleagues in natural England, because it isn't a native species, they may have concerns, but it isn't invasive. It's a problem in that respect.
In South Somerset, we very nearly put in a boiler to burn miscanthus grass as a heating option for Brimton Way. We stopped doing it because of the cost, the capital cost of the plant. But if you're going to try and remove phosphate, you've got to remove the miscanthus from the site and off of the levels. My second question is about reverse osmosis. Now, we've just been told by Wessex Water they don't have the resources to put in, which they didn't tell me before, the hiring of the sulfate plant. I understand that on your trial in June, they had to filter the material that went into your unit. And that being the case, how are they going to find the resources to put the filters in for the trial that's going on in the next 6 months? Just so that people understand on the committee here, the size of the filter on the reverse osmosis is 1 mu, or 1/1000th of a millimetre. The filters that Wessex Water put in to remove the viruses and the bugs from their sewage are 0.4 of a mu, and they have major problems clearing them. Now, I don't know who's done the deal on the filtering, but I'd just like an answer, please.
We are aware of the issue, and so are Salinity Solutions. As you rightly pointed out, this matter arose when we did the pre-trial last summer, which was at no cost to the council. To those ends, Salinity Solutions are working with a third party in terms of pre-treating that effluent before it goes into their reverse batch osmosis unit. Wessex Water are also providing more information and data in terms of the consistency of the effluent going into the actual unit themselves. And we've got Jonathan on the call here if you wanted to ask more information about the associated lab tests that need to be done, because what they need to do is understand precisely what that effluent constitution is. But it isn't a matter, and that's why we're doing it as part of the trial, to understand this issue.
Right, I'm going to finish in the room and then bring Mike Rigby in, who's been waiting some time. So, Steve?
I understand from your projects that I understand the sort of thinking behind the projects, except for margin planting. I'm not sure how margin planting is going to reduce phosphates unless there's an area that regularly floods, because it doesn't migrate through the soil at all. It tends to, unless even in heavy rain. And so by margin planting, you're not going to remove any phosphates from the system at all. I don't understand the thinking there.
So I'll clarify what I meant by, so the miscanthus, I think I mentioned margin, it can be planted on marginal land, as in land that isn't good for agricultural production. The riparian buffer strips are also generally in floodplain. And what it does is it intercepts and reduces soil runoff that contains phosphates, but also helps to suck up any legacy phosphates in the soil from, obviously it depends on the lay of the land, and some of this will need to be modelled, which is what Natural England are starting to do now, looking at modelling opportunities, and Wessex Water. So we've met with the team with the work with Jonathan on some of the farm catchment areas to understand what kind of information that they've got that we can learn from, basically. So it's about intercepting soil runoff and reducing that.
if I can come back up. Yeah, I understand that, but how is this going to be measured? Because I've seen flagged projects in the past that have spent a lot of money for no demonstrable benefit at all. And I would be very suspicious of them proposing similar solutions in the future. So I'd like to see more than just a pre-project model, but a commitment to actually demonstrate that it actually has produced benefits afterwards as well, in that case.
So Natural England have published guidance around what it is able to remove by way of phosphates. And don't forget, at the end of the day, this is mitigation to unlock housing. So they then build in a precautionary buffer, and that's how it's then applied to understanding what phosphates it will remove. There will also need to be some monitoring and evaluation of the efficacy of those measures, and that's what we're waiting for from government.
Martin?
Thanks, Chairman. I probably should have asked this a bit earlier, but we had the this report to do with credits is in the various catchment areas and which fall into various planning areas. I think that really explains it. Are the credits by these mitigation sites, are they confined to those areas, catchment areas, or can, say, area south apply for some of the credit from a scheme in shaking heads going on over there? Yeah, I just seems that we are one authority, and it seems if we're trying to move housing along by getting credit from wherever, that if there's excess in one catchment area, why we can't apply for it in another area who hasn't got the credit. Does that make sense? Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, the question absolutely makes sense. But so we need to deliver phosphate mitigation within the River Tone to unlock the housing in the river, the impacts on the River Tone, phosphate mitigation in the River Parrett that unlocks housing in the River Parrett, and that's the way it functions as part of the requirement at this current time. Just to kind of assure members, though, we are aware that there are a number of nature-based solutions and projects coming forward in the Somerset catchment. So we're reasonably confident that there is going to be sufficient coming forward as part of the call for sites or as part of the third credit market that the council's been able to assist coming forward. So there is a lot of third party credit schemes coming forward in the wider catchment area.
Mike, would you like to come in now? Mike Rigby?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of quick questions from me, please. It was good to hear from Mr. Wheeldon earlier when he said that the work that Wessex Water are doing will remove more phosphate from the system than the housing proposed will ever contribute. We'd agreed last year that we were going to take some legal advice to look at that particular issue, and I'm wondering if that's yet available. And I apologise if this has already been covered. I was late joining the meeting. But the number of 1,400 was mentioned earlier, just as I joined. Am I right in thinking that's the number of homes that we're expecting this £9.6 million to release? And if that's the case, what proportion of that 1,400 is affordable, please?
Sorry, Mike, I might not have heard the questions very clearly. So the 1,400 dwellings, so the 9.6 million ultimately will unlock all the housing caught in the catchment because we'll be revolving that funding into delivering additional mitigation. The legal advice we have now got, and we're looking to circulate that, following up the member briefing note that we circulated where we put the link into the planning advisory service as legal advice, but we will follow it up with the legal advice that we've now received. Have I misunderstood the 1,400 dwelling question, Mike?
Well, what was the number 1,400 then? Can someone explain what that was?
Mike, it was one of the credit schemes that's already in place will unlock 1,400 homes.
Okay, thanks for that. And when you circulate the legal advice, can you circulate the instruction with it, please? And then just on the issue of the recycling of the money, over what period of time will all of the homes be released if it's going to be recycled in that way?
Sorry, did you say over what period of time will all the housing be unlocked?
Yeah, so you're saying
The
that the
9.6 million?
the 9.6 million pounds will be invested and then recycled as the credits are sold. That's obviously going to take some time. You can't do all of that in one go. So over
Oh, no,
what period of,
absolutely.
so over what period of time will all of the blocked homes be unblocked?
Well, we can't answer that question specifically at this stage because we've only just been, the funding's only just been confirmed, and this is an interim delivery strategy. So apologies, Mike, if you've joined late, you might not have heard. So the interim delivery strategy is before the members at the moment, is to, in order for us to demonstrate that we are able to demonstrate to government committed spend. So we have to be able to demonstrate committed spend before the end of this financial year.
Yeah.
We will be doing further work to understand how many houses will be unlocked, and obviously that will be tied up with the call for sites to see how many phosphate mitigation schemes come forward. What Natural England have informed us of, though, is that in terms of the number of third-party credit schemes that are coming forward for approval for Natural England, there's sufficient to unlock all the housing that's currently held up in the Somerset Levels and Moors catchment area. The issue and the question, I suppose, is the price at which those credits might want to trade and whether they're attractive, sufficiently attractive price for developers. But we have been informed there's sufficient mitigation to unlock all the housing within the catchment area.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Michael Dunn.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit confused about how the price of the credits is worked out, and I think I saw a figure of 55,000 somewhere. How is the market going to work? Because in the end, if someone manages to produce them cheaply, that will be possibly the most attractive option. I don't know whether it works on the bulk of housing or just the number of credits, whether it sounds like it could be quite a confusing market for those who want to buy a credit. And will the council try and control that price? If the council are in charge of their own credits, do you use a market price or do you have a subsidised council price?
We can't control the market, but I think it's fair to say that the market is still in its infancy, not just for nutrient credits, but for environmental credits, full stop. So we price them based on the cost of the cost of implementing that phosphate mitigation measure, how many kilograms of P that removes. And obviously some landowners will then want to make a profit on that. So the most cost effective measures that we're aware of at the moment in terms of what a cost of kilogram of phosphate removal is the upgrades to septic tanks, and that market again is growing. So we've got 2 third-party credit schemes operating in the Somerset area where they're offering to upgrade septic tanks. So we've done a lot of work to facilitate third-party credit schemes to help the market grow. This funding, obviously we're keen to ensure we can bring that price down as much as possible, because we need to ensure that it doesn't impact on developer viability long term. Because if it does, then we end up taking a hit as the local planning authority on other things. So yes, we are keen to try and bring the price down as much as possible. We still need to be competitive because the government's got a number of other environmental funding schemes that landowners can go through in terms of sustainable farming incentive. So yeah, we still need to make sure that we're competitive in order to make sure that landowners come forward and want to engage with us in providing phosphate credits.
And so, sorry, Chair, can I ask another question? It's a separate question. If the salinity project proves to work, are you committed to going with the company who are doing the research for you, or will you go out to open market and get the best value quotes that way?
So Salinity Solutions reverse batch osmosis is a new technology, and it's only them that provide reverse batch osmosis. So it's all picked up in the waiver. If the trial's successful, we will roll out the product working with Salinity. But obviously it will depend on the cost. If it's not good value for money, then we won't be working in it.
Okay, any more questions? If not, we'll bring this item to a close. Yeah. So recommendations are that the Strategic Planning Committee notes the content of the report and the activity across the 3 affected river catchments that feed into the Somerset levels and moors, the Tone, Parrett and the Brew, which continues to unlock the delivery of housing and effective development to ensure nutrient neutrality. B, the recent legislative changes introduced by the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023 as summarised in paragraphs 37 to 39 of this report. C, that the Strategic Planning Committee agrees to delegate authority to the Head of Planning, Chief Planning Officer in consultation with the Chair and Strategic Planning Committee to 1. Oversee the delivery of the interim delivery strategy, including improving any documents, e.g. Section 106 agreements, needed to support the implementation of the interim delivery strategy enclosed at Appendix A. 2. Spend up to 9.6 million from the local nutrient mitigation capital fund to deliver nutrient mitigation schemes in line with the grant conditions and promised outstanding government funding in the financial year of 24-25. And 3. Commit to the spend of the local nutrient mitigation fund on the delivery of nutrient mitigation and the indicative programme of spend as detailed in Table 4, Appendix A to this report. Everybody happy to note that report? Sorry.
Propose that we note it, Chair.
Could you do for that, please? I'm not yeah, okay. Sorry, you're absolutely right, Martin. In that case, anybody that left the room cannot vote on that. And I think, Mike, you left the room. So did you, Henry. Okay. So.
Okay, are you still happy that I proposed it, Chair?
Yes.
We have a problem with Mike can't.
Mike can't second it. So I've got anybody else to second it? Mike don't. Thank you. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Okay, everybody happy? Right. So item 6, that brings us on to the quarterly report on planning service performance. And I think Alison, you can lead this one off. Thank you.
I'm going to start this one off and then Helen's going to take over. So this report brings to members 2 quarterly reports for Q2 and for Q3. Important to note that the Q3 statistics were only published by DLUC on Friday last week. So what's in the report is what we submitted to DLUC. Sorry, that's another meeting going on here. And that the Q3 stats obviously have been published by DLUC on Friday, and they reflect, I think, what we've submitted to DLUC. So normally we wouldn't have brought Q3 until next month, but rather than bringing you two reports in consecutive meetings, we've tried to combine the two. So you'll see in the appendix that we have the Q2 and the Q3 stats separately. Just a couple of things. Nationally, applications are down. So the number of applications are down by about 9% for the same quarter from a year earlier. And clearly that has got fee implications, particularly given that the fee increases came into being from the beginning of December. And so just to flag that has affected our fee income for this financial year. Interesting to note also that nationally 42% of all applications include a performance agreement or an extension of time, and that rises to up to 75% for major decisions, and that's an upward trend. The government, and the reason I'm raising it is because the government are currently consulting on removing the facility to exclude planning performance agreements and extension of times from the statistics that we report. And obviously that could have significant implications on our ability to meet the speed targets that are set by national government. And on that, in that context, government can designate authorities who fail to meet the performance targets. And if they designate those authorities, the impact of that is to mean that applicants can go straight to the Secretary of State for their applications to be determined. And the government have just designated two authorities, one of which is Bristol, the other was St Albans, so that those applicants now have a choice about going to the Planning Inspectorate for their applications to be determined rather than to the local planning authority. Obviously, that is again of significance, not only because it takes it out of the local decision-making forum, but also potentially we end up having to do as much work without the fee. So that is a concern. I'm pleased to say, and Helen will report to you on this at the moment, that we are not in that territory. But obviously, if the government do change the measuring arrangements, which they're consulting on, that may change. And the other measure that government look at is the quality of decision making, and that's the percentage of applications that are overturned on appeal. Again, that they look at if there's more than 10% of applications overturned to appeal, then they will look to potentially to designate authorities. At the moment, 12 authorities have been named in the Q3 stats as having failed to meet the government targets for quality. And those authorities clearly have been put on notice that they're in danger of having their planning powers removed. So just I suppose that's why the performance figures are so important and why we do report them quarterly to you. Although, as I say, we are not in the territory either in terms of quality or speed at the moment for that. Helen.
Thank you. So we are looking at the various bullet points that you can see on the screen for the presentation this morning, and most of which Alison has just outlined. This will be a romp through what we've done because you have got the full report and you've got the appendices from the two quarters that we're looking at, Q2 and Q3. So looking at the number of applications, and I think the trend graph on the right is probably the most appropriate. It shows that drop in application numbers that Alison referred to just now. It shows that we are down across all of the area teams. Minerals and waste, the little pink line at the bottom, pretty static, because when we look at our mineral and waste applications, there's not much variance in those. We felt it was important that you see all of them on the same graph. As Alison said earlier, we have to look at our targets, and the dotted lines that you can see on the graph on the right of this screen are the nationally set targets. And the bars that you can see are where we sit against those target numbers. And again, this is lifted straight from your report, so if you can't see the screen, they're in the appendices and the report for you. The only area at the moment which is falling short of those targets, is West, and that is due to staffing levels. We've seen a drop in planning officers, and we've not managed to recruit backfill yet. However, whilst we do fall below that number, target threshold at the moment, when we look at the overall statistics for the whole authority area, we are well above the level where we would be considered for designation. We're sitting fairly in the middle of the pack nationally, which is no bad place to be. When we look at the national figure for minerals and waste applications, the average is 91.6% determination in time. Somerset Minerals and Waste team is currently at 85.7, which is nothing to be concerned about. We're clawing back where we have been in the past and aiming for 100%, which is easy if all of our applications are determined in time because we only have a few each quarter. But conversely, missing one has a significant impact on those numbers. And with regard to the area teams, nationally for majors, the average is 87.7%, and we're at 85.7%. And for minors, the national average is 86.8%, and we are currently at 90.3%, so well above the national there. And I think it's worth noting that despite the challenges that we have at the moment with resource, finance, reorganisation, we are still managing to perform. But I think it's worth noting that will depend on us being able to resource the teams fully over the coming weeks and months. This gives us a picture of pre-application inquiries that we've received. And as you would expect, we have seen a drop in pre-application inquiries, but that mirrors the drop in applications. So I'm not at all surprised that we've seen that. It does it by area because that's how we have reported historically. Over time, we will have to consider whether we keep it as area reporting or whether we move to a single authority report. But while we're still on separate local plans, it makes sense to keep it as individual areas. Alison mentioned earlier when she spoke to you about appeal decisions. Now, we've kept these separate for reporting purposes, again, for the reasons I've just outlined. But I do think it's worth noting that where we are having less applications, we ought to be having less appeals. Certainly that's true for North. East is static. South, we've seen an increase in appeals, and I do think that's something that we will need to be mindful of moving forward. And West, we've seen a drop in appeals. And the reason that this is so important is because of that designation consideration. If we are having more appeals and if appeals are being overturned, officer decisions are being overturned and the appeals are not won, we will potentially put ourselves in the area of designation, not for our timeliness of decision making, which is going to be a challenge with the changes that we've got coming with the lack of extensions of time, etc. But for the quality of the decision making and the fact that those appeals are not going to potentially go in our favour. My apologies, the minerals and waste slide there, but with so few applications, the number of appeals is low as well. So coming on to the enforcement cases as of the end of December Q3, you'll see they are reported there. In your appendices, you also have the Q2 statistics, but I haven't included them in the slides. And just so we're clear, the number of resolved cases East have had a concerted effort to close outstanding cases that were on hand, which is why you're seeing a spike in the East figures. It doesn't mean that we've got a lot more enforcement happening at the moment. It just means we've closed out a lot of historic cases. That brings us to the end of this month's presentation, albeit shorter, but what I didn't want to do is repeat what you've heard before in terms of the background, but just to give you the highlights and the overview of where we are at present. And I am very happy, as I'm sure Alison is, for us to take some questions.
Simon?
Thank you, Chair. The first question is to Alison. The issue that we have in determining applications on time, we don't appear to have, if we're not allowed to count those that have got an extension of time. How on earth do we deal with things like an HRA that we can't get done within 13 weeks because it's the wrong time of year? You can't do the crested newt surveys, not all the various other bits and pieces. How do we overcome that if we are being penalised for not doing it because the application's coming at the wrong time of year? For me, that seems like we're just going to get a kicking for no good reason.
Well, that is the subject of the consultation, obviously, at the moment in terms of, their proposals to reduce the use of extension of time. We don't know what exemptions and so on will be made, so we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, well, I'm sure we're making a robust response to the consultation. I don't doubt that for a moment. The second question I have, please, is actually for Helen. That's on enforcement. I know there is a backlog of enforcement cases. I know that we have recruitment issues. However, the enforcement cases are really, really important that the local planning authority is seen to be active and enforcing the regulations. Can you offer any hope that we're going to get more enforcement officers and catch up with ourselves? Because it's a real problem.
I believe we are looking to replace an enforcement officer in the South team at the moment. Enforcement is always an issue. Obviously, because it's a discretionary activity, it's unlikely that we're going to have the finance to increase the resource above what it currently is. In my experience, the more enforcement cases and activity you take, the more it generates in terms of other people raising complaints and activity, and there is never sufficient resource to do everything, which is why we have an agreed enforcement policy, which we took to members last year, and we prioritise certain types of cases in accordance with that.
Thank you for the response. I don't know what the answer is, but we do need to try and get on top of it and stay on top of it, because it's the bit the public pick up on all the time. And most of the local government is firmly broken currently.
Thank you, Simon. And if I may, through the chair, add to that, Alison's got it spot on, as you would expect. I would just say that the enforcement teams are working together. They're not sticking within their former boundaries. And that is something we should be really proud of, is that they are working collaboratively to direct that resource that we have to the priorities that we've identified.
Got Martin next.
On the appeals figures, these are all appeals, not just committee decision appeals, they're officers' appeals as well. It's quite interesting to break down, because the last breakdown I saw of appeals, we were always told at committee meetings, you're going to go to appeal, we're going to lose money, etc., etc. The majority of the appeals on South were in fact against officers. It would be quite interesting to break it down, because it's not all decisions taken by planning committee. The majority of appeals, when the last figures I saw, were from officers. So it is important to us as councillors to know that, because we're always getting beaten up with this is going to go appeal if you go in a certain way, frankly.
So appeals are reported regularly to committee, so you should be seeing details of all the all the appeal decisions that have been received since the last committee meeting. And that will make it clear whether there were originally officer decisions or committee decisions.
Does, but I will make sure that the next lot I see, it is on there, or hopefully it'll be on there. Thank you.
Simon, do you want to sorry to cut you off?
Just very briefly, if I may, Chair, thank you. It was just to say that I understand the pressures the enforcement officers are under, and realise that it's almost a thankless task sometimes. And I appreciate the efforts they make, but it is one of the one area that the public pick up on time and time again, and they judge us by the performance or otherwise of that. And to say that in West, I'm very pleased with our appeal success rate, if you like, because we do pretty well, which is always encouraging. I always like it when a planning inspector agrees with me. But there we are. So thank you to the staff. I was not suggesting that they were not working hard. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Steve.
Yeah, just a point. I was banging on the previous two meetings we had saying enforcement, and you was told it wasn't, it was discretionary. But I have noticed a considerable uptick in enforcement action. Particularly Neil has been so helpful recently. I'd just like to be able to say thank you to him, because on three cases recently, unfortunately one, because it was so delayed, the 10-year rule applied. But and the other ones, he was really excellent. So thank you very much.
Thank you. No, I was just going to say we can feed that back. Thank you.
Wes?
Thank you, Chair. Does anyone have a view on why we're having such an issue on recruiting the right type of staff for the planning departments across the county? I mean, I currently have residents ring me who've got applications and want to know what the hell's going on there. I've had architects ring me, all sorts. Concerned about, you know, the slow progress. Really, does anyone have a view or not?
So this is a national problem. It's not a problem just particular to Somerset. There is a shortage of particularly planners at senior and principal level. We went out to advert recently for senior planners. We were not able to fill all the vacant posts. On the back of that, I'm currently trying to go through a process of getting a recruitment allowance added on to the salary levels. Unfortunately, the salary levels of the new Somerset Council are lower than many of the previous district salaries. And that hasn't helped us with the recruitment issue, to be quite honest. So we're doing what we can. We have signed up to the Pathways to Planning programme to start to try and bring more planners in at the lowest end, you know, graduates and apprentices. But obviously that doesn't deal with the experience that we need to deal with the complex applications that we've got. So we are reliant a lot on agency staff, unfortunately. We know we need to try and sort that, because that's not the future. But, you know, there's no easy answer, I'm afraid.
Henry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you don't do enforcement, what's the point of a planning application?
We do enforcement. We do enforcement in accordance with the policy that members have agreed last year. Unfortunately, we don't have the resource to do as much enforcement as I know that members and the communities would like us to do. And that is true across the country. You know, nationally, enforcement is a discretionary activity. It's not a statutory requirement to deliver. And when you are short of resources, the resources need to be going to where the fee income is and determining the planning applications.
That's an answer to the question I asked them. Because I've got people who are saying, what's the point of putting a planning application in, because my neighbour is not enforced. And it's not just one or two type people, it's quite a lot more. We all know about Mr. Hopkins.
Well, the issue, if people do not put in planning applications, they run the risk, obviously, of not being able to sell their properties, because that when the search is undertaken, it will come up as not having planning permission, and then they won't be able to get funding and so on for any purchase. So it is in people's interest to put in a planning application and have a situation regularised.
Martin?
Thanks for letting me back. Yeah, on the statistics that were Helen gave out on the paper, I was looking at Area South, which I'm concerned with, and I was this morning before I came out, I had a look at some of the applications on my ward. Now then, there's the ones I looked at. There's two minor individuals, if you like, over 2 years. Still waiting, and all the website says decision not made. Now, and I get continual phone calls from both of those. There was also one major, which is well over 2 years. Presumably, they are not in the statistics. Any of these? Are they given Are they given extensions? Are ones with extensions not shown on the statistics? Because if my ward's anything to go by, Chard North. Those statistics cannot be right if the rest of the wards in Area South are in a similar way. So there's some gap between what's on the statistics and what is actually on the ground, I think. Can you explain that?
So the statistics just relate to the applications that have been determined. So live applications are not included in the reports and the monitoring done by DLUC. They just report those determined, and obviously a lot of those will have had extensions of time. We do monitor the number of applications that we have on hand, and I think that's what you're referring to, is the number of applications on hand, and you'll see in the report that we do look at that and the trend in terms of the number of applications on hand. And if you look at that, you will see that there is a sizable number of applications on hand, and many more than we would like to have an efficient system operating. So you're absolutely right. There are a large number of applications which, for one reason or another, have not been determined. A lot of that will be down to the fact that they're waiting for a phosphate solution, and potentially haven't got one yet. But nevertheless, there is more in the system than we would like, and one of the things we need to do is to try and bring that down. Unfortunately, we have a situation where officers have very high caseloads, and that means that they are dealing with lots of inquiries and volume of comments, which means that they don't find the time to write up the reports that they have. I'd like to get to a situation where we have lower caseloads and the throughput can be more efficient.
Yeah, I think I understand that. Yeah. I thought that the statistic, but this is for the statistics that were given us today were for government approval, so that we don't get put on the. Yeah, okay. I have to say that your explanation I understand, but it doesn't apply, because two of those I've mentioned, which I looked up this morning as a matter of interest before I came here, have both submitted and had approval of phosphate individual, and they're still awaiting. And it's just not satisfactory, frankly. I mean, we're talking, one of them is well over 2 years.
It may be that they're waiting for a Section 106 agreement to be signed. If they've got phosphate mitigation, it's almost certain that they will need a Section 106 related to that. And it may be that's the reason why the decision notice hasn't been issued. And until decision notice is issued, it won't be included in the statistics returned to government. The government obviously monitor our performance in terms of meeting time targets. We monitor those too internally. As I've already described, there is a large amount of applications in the system, many more than we would like. One of the reasons is because a large number will be waiting Section 106 agreements.
Yeah, I think I understand, Chairman, but I'm sorry, coming back, but it really doesn't help ward members, all this. I spend my whole week by answering the telephone or emails from disgruntled people who put in a perfect application some time ago and either haven't heard anything or just been told, you know, well, you've got to wait for this, that, and the other. But so it strikes me the system isn't helpful for us ward members.
I'd just like to add something to that actually, because in my division there, I have several applications in my division that are actually being held up by the applicant themselves because they won't enter into a 106 agreement or they won't agree to that part of it. And it's not it's, as I've been told by the planners, it's not for them to drop that off the board. And I have neighbours and residents complaining because there's an application pending and that they're considering that's affecting their house sale or price, which is obviously we know is not a material consideration, but I'm getting, you know, a lot of grief over that. And I understand what Martin's saying, but a lot of this is actually the applicant that is, you know, is holding that up. And yeah. Sorry, Martin, you asked, you've been, sorry, Mike, you wanted to.
Okay, just something that probably is obvious, but it's not to me, but we've got the figures for the 5-year housing supply. Is it possible that if you added those all together and divided by the number of areas that we'd be close to reaching our 5-year supply? Unfortunately, I'm in area east, so we're not doing very well on our 5-year supply, but do we have to wait till the next local plan to combine all of these? We do. Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately we do. It's also all based on the housing need identified in each individual former district area. And until we have a plan for the whole of Somerset, we are still going to have to, in accordance with the current regime anyway, deal with it. What I would say is that we are currently in the process of updating the 5-year housing land supply, which we believe will improve the situation in some parts of the authority.
Okay, well, that's slightly cheered me up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the 5-year HLS, I think we're expecting that report to be written in the next couple of weeks.
We need to go out and do some site visits to check on the number of homes that have been completed. And so it's probably May we're probably looking at.
It's May. Thank you for that. And the other comment I wanted to just make sure that I'd understood correctly, and that is that when we are looking at the delays, when we have a situation, as our chair has described, that the applicant won't sign the 106, then surely we are placed in abeyance at that point, because you can't force an applicant to sign a 106. If you can't get agreement, it's not the planning authority's fault if they can't get agreement for a 106 or any of the other technical documents that we need. But where does that leave us in terms of our reporting and how the government then looks at where we are? You know, because I can think of several potentially large volume house builders that are perfectly happy to delay stuff, particularly if they feel there might be an advantage to them at some point in the future.
At the moment, generally speaking, they will sign extensions of time agreements so that they will be covered by that and therefore not fall foul of the performance measures in that regard. Going forward, given what the government consulting on, that may become more of an issue. In terms of, we are increasingly, and I hope across the whole of the authority area, now taking resolutions to committee that if the section 106s aren't signed within 6 months, that we have delegated authority to refuse those applications in order to try and mean that they don't just sit there.
I thoroughly approve of that and think it's not before time.
Any more questions? No? Any online? No? Okay. So on to recommendation. The recommendation is that the committee notes the report for quarters 2 and 3. Sorry, clearly noted then. Thank you. Right, so that brings us to the end. So I'll bring this meeting to a close at 11:44. Do we know what date the next meeting is, or was that in abeyance at the moment?